Welcome, everyone. Tonight we are going to discuss empathy. And I think many of you know that Moment magazine, which is a wonderful magazine, I think it comes out 4 times a year, um, has as a routine feature an Ask the Rabbis section. And they ask the rabbis interesting questions, and the rabbis respond with a paragraph or two. And the question that they asked, and it's winter 2026, so it's the current issue, is empathy a Jewish value? And I read this a while ago, and if I remember correctly, it seemed to me everybody would agree yes, but there was some interesting responses, so I think it is going to be interesting to go through. Um, would someone I did look this up, so let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I did look up a definition of empathy. This is a pretty simple definition. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Merriam-Webster is a little more the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of others. Okay.
Yes, exactly
So
right.
that's the definition. Always a good place to start. So what would you say before we start reading what the rabbis have to say? Would you say this is a Jewish value?
Yeah,
And remember, things can be a good value and not be a Jewish value. I just want to state that for the record.
let me get my hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I ask myself and others, how do you gain empathy? Empathy. How do you inherit it? How do you deal with it? How do you make it work in your body or in your mind? That's what I'm wondering about, and how to use it.
Okay, but so you're not answering the question whether it's a Jewish value.
No, I'm not. It could be
Okay.
a value from anybody.
Okay. So, well, by Jewish value doesn't mean that's actually an important distinction. When I say something is a Jewish value,
Yes.
I don't mean that only Jews embrace that value. What
Okay.
I would say is it is a central part of Jewish teaching.
It
So,
is
so some
absolutely.
Jewish values, that's actually a very important distinction, which I didn't think of. So some Jewish values are really embraced by Judaism.
That's right.
I would say don't eat pork is a Jewish
Right.
commandment, a value. It'd be interesting to discuss whether it is a value, but clearly that's not embraced by everyone. Um,
Right.
Human life is sacred is a Jewish value, and
Yes.
it is embraced, I would say, by most people.
Yes.
Probably not
Exactly.
everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just going to go across the top of my screen. Jerry, you're muted, Jerry.
All through the Torah, we are commanded to care and respond to those in need and to feel the loss, the difficulty, and restore perhaps dignity to someone who is troubled by something, maybe food insecurities, maybe other things. But the idea of certainly caring is all through the Torah, over and
Yes.
over, and to remember that we too were once, you know.
Yep, we were slaves. And yes, as we'll see, it's 30, I think, by one count, at least 36 times the commandment is repeated.
Right.
Uh, yeah, Alan.
I was just going to maybe say the same thing. Maybe the word empathy, and I don't know what that word is in Hebrew, but I think the behavior that you gave as a definition reflects how people are supposed to treat each other.
Yep. Mhm.
So therefore, that falls in the category of a Jewish value to me.
Yeah, just to nitpick, I would say you don't treat an enemy necessarily like that, but generally, yes. And I think if I remember correctly, the Hebrew word for empathy is something like empathia. It is a borrowed word from English, so there is no traditional Hebrew word.
Not Rahmanas.
No, Rahmanas is kind of motherly, almost loving, caring. and different than empathy. Paul, did you have something you were going to add?
I did have one more thing to say. As we go through this, I'd like to find out how empathy is created in my body. How is empathy created in a person's body? How does it get there? And does it get there by watching others, or are we born with it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say it's an interesting question
Yeah.
about values in general. Are we born with innate values,
Yes.
or are values taught and learned? Stephen,
Exactly.
did you have?
Meet Cheryl.
Alan, I see you were waving your hand. I didn't know if
I was,
Stephen
I
was.
was going to rephrase Paul's question because my experience is you can learn to be more empathetic with other people. And my experience is illustrated by the stress the emphasis when I worked for Apple in an Apple store. Empathy was an important training topic because the way you engage customers, the way Apple's approach was to be empathetic to the kind of questions they have or the problems they have. So, and so I learned. I'm using myself as an example. I might have been empathetic, but the day-to-day use of empathy is part of my answer to you, Paul. I don't know if it's DNA, but
I don't know either, but you
Yeah,
could let's look at it this way. You come out of the door and you're green. You're painted green all over your body. And does that mean empathy? How do you come out of into the world? I mean, how do you express yourself? How do you carry forth the ideas in your head with what do you believe in to make things good for you or make things good
yeah,
for other people?
okay,
That's
and
what I
and
mean.
and I would say that's a part of religion in general is to teach values,
Yes, teaching.
and some
Absolutely.
values may be innate.
Yes,
It's sort of an interesting discussion about that, and some values are taught because they are not innate.
right.
Lois.
It's just feeling like I think because I'm getting ready for Seder, which is at my house this year again. And I think of it
I guess
as
I
sort
could
of
say
the
I feel your pain.
that
Sorry,
too. Good one,
sorry,
Rabbi.
sorry.
So I think of it like one time every year I have my little notes from previous Seders I've run. And one of them was the theme was you know the heart of a stranger.
Yes,
And I think that's the Jewish value
yes, exactly.
of empathy, and
Perfect.
that's
That's
the
beautiful.
easiest way. Now, and maybe Rabbi Lacker, is that Torah or Talmud? Where does that
Oh,
come from?
so it's, I mean, it is a basically protecting the powerless is the most repeated commandment in the Torah. I think I'm repeating things we're going to see the rabbi saying, and by one count, it's 36 times it's repeated, and and it's part of the legal code, and quite often it says, protect the stranger because you were strangers. And the interesting thing, which I came across, I think it's Richard Elliott Friedman saying, looking at other ancient legal codes, around the same time, if you look at all of them, the total number of times any legal code in the ancient Near East commanded taking care of the stranger is exactly zero. It doesn't come up in any of the other legal codes. And Friedman speculates that we were twice strangers. He speculates that the group of Hebrews that were in Egypt were actually Levites. So they were visitors, they were strangers living in the land of Egypt. And then they came out and came into, the land of Israel, and they once again were strangers because they were the refugees from Egypt that came into the land. I mean, it's not the story is told in the Torah. Story is told in the Torah is sort of all the Israelites were in Egypt, and then they all went uh, into the land of Israel. So I would say the scholars, certainly at least Friedman says no, it was just the Levites, and so the Levites had this double experience of being strangers in a strange land, and that's his speculation as to why this became so central in Torah. Okay, so let's jump into the article. And the nice thing about these articles is they are different rabbis' writings, so we can have a group of people reading. We don't have to burden poor Joanne to read everything. Let's see.
Okay,
So,
it's okay.
so the first one, I always like to point out who it is. This is Gershon Winkler, who often has a interesting and different perspective. He actually lived in Ventura for quite a while, and now he is in Colorado. Okay, so Joanne, would you like to start?
Okay. Not independent, not in the way many of us misunderstand it. Values are meaningless when we treat them like commodities to be gambled with on the stock market of political correctness. Judaism, wrote Abraham Joshua Heschel in Hashem in Search of Man, is not just a way of living, it is a way of thinking. And we've all but lost a good chunk of that way of thinking by blindly hopping onto whichever bandwagon of empathy happens to be in vogue, assuming naively that empathy is a Jewish value. It is certainly not a Jewish value when overly empathetic policies by local jurisdictions enable rapes and murders by repeat offenders. The fallacy of empathy has of late also enabled sovereign nations to be overrun by cultures bent on destroying them, streaming across their borders, no weapons needed, under the Trojan horse banner of asylum seeking. Empathy,
Empathy, schmempathy.
right, okay, empathy, as the second century Rabbi Eliezer taught, anyone who acts mercifully toward the cruel will in the end act with cruelty toward the merciful.
So what do you think he's talking about? What kind of empathy is he objecting to? And he's always the first one cited in these articles, and often the most outrageous. So what do you think he's responding to?
Maybe the Holocaust, maybe even the Nazis.
Okay.
I wouldn't have much empathy for them.
No, so I don't think he's talking about an empathy bandwagon.
Yep.
That's in vogue. So that's my question. Is somebody picking that up? I'm not asking you to agree with him, but at least understand what he's saying. Yeah, Stephen.
What bothers me about this, among other things, is the way he's described this asylum seeking of cultures bent on destroying them, streaming across their borders, or whatever. That's actually probably how a lot of the countries, including the United States, that turned away Jews fleeing from the Nazis, thought of them.
Yes. So what do you think he is objecting to specifically? Can you give me, if he were giving us an example of that?
Repeat offenders?
Oh, I mean, I'll just give you the one that occurs to me is because France basically colonized North Africa. People living in North Africa have unlimited access to enter France. I don't know if they're technically French citizens, but in some ways it's not so different than Puerto Rico and the United States. You don't need a visa to go from Puerto Rico to the United States. And, I know Sonia has lots of relatives living in France, that France has a real issue with Muslim terrorists living in France. And there is genuine fear by the Jewish community in France of those folks, and there are a lot of them. Whether you agree with it or disagree, I don't even want to debate, but I think that's what he's talking about. I think what he is saying, and I think it's a point worth considering, that if we're overly empathetic, what does he call it? If we're overly empathetic, that can actually lead to problems. And he quotes, which I think is a good quote, that anyone who acts mercifully toward the cruel will in the end act cruelly toward the merciful. So it is an interesting problem. I would say it's very much part of political debate these days about how we should treat people who are as Stephen is pointing out, who are seeking asylum. And I would say the pendulum swings, and he's representing that. I would say a more right wing part of the pendulum. Alan.
So, can we use this idea of empathy with the concept that we're all created in the image of God?
Yes, I would say that is a justification for an underlying reason to encourage empathy.
Yes, I would think so.
The related, or not related, but second thing that's going through my mind has to do with humility. So, can you be humble and not provide treat other people with empathy?
I'm not sure the two have a one-in-one correspondence.
Okay, I'm just brainstorming. I
I
mean,
mean, I
because
would say that.
we use the word humility a lot in Talmud documents. We don't
Mhm.
use the word empathy in the ones that I read. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, if I'm remembering correctly, there isn't even a Hebrew word for empathy. Okay, would someone else like to read humanist?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Yes, empathy is absolutely a Jewish value, but it is a demanding one, bounded by responsibility and judgment. The Torah's lodestar is v'ahavta, the v'rechacha kamocha, often translated, love your neighbor as yourself. My teacher suggested a different reading, love your neighbor because he's like you. This grounds empathy in moral recognition. Other people will not remain abstractions to us when we think of them as ourselves,
As other
capable
selves.
as
Sorry.
other selves, yes, capable of pain, fear, dignity, and moral choice, just as we all are. The Torah further reminds us repeatedly that here we go, we're strangers in Egypt and are therefore called upon to resist cruelty, indifference, dehumanization. These teachings transform empathy into an ethical discipline, asking us to imagine the inner life of others and act accordingly. Yet, Judaism never suggests that this attitude is limited to
Is
self-negating,
is limitless or
limitless, or self-negating. Empathy does not require us to accommodate every demand or ignore real risks. Compassion is not naivete. Our rabbis believed in compassion, but also in firm boundaries to protect life, communal safety, and moral order. In today's debates, what some call suicidal empathy conflates empathy with abdication of moral responsibility. Our tradition rejects that confusion. Empathy must inform judgment, not replace it. Practiced in the balanced sense, empathy is a Jewish value. It is both rooted in shared humanity and tempered by reason, accountability, and committed to the well-being of our communities and our people. Rabbi.
so I would say more nuanced. I love the fact that he points out the kind of thing that I love to point out. This is Leviticus 19, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. But the ka and kamocha can mean, as he is saying, it can mean love your neighbor who is like you. And of course, in English, that would be very, very different um, readings. So again, I just love the fact that Hebrew has so many different possible readings. Um, so um, So again, this even gets more subtle. There's a Jewish value in being able to argue positions that you don't believe in. It's actually, I know, Jerry, you were a debating coach, and you get assigned a question and a position, and it's not necessarily a position that you hold.
Right.
So actually, Rabbi Falik made me think more about this, about suicidal empathy. Um, I I think suicidal is a strong word, um, and it made me think of things like we certainly can and should feel empathy for people who are in prison, right? But the question is, is do we there is an instinct and a temptation that we understand them, and maybe they are in prison because of the way they were raised, or because of beaten by their parents or poor or whatever. And I would say what Rabbi Falik is saying is you could go overboard on that. Um, I would certainly say we should feel empathy for people in prison. They are created in God's image, and but the question is how far you go.
Could you feel empathy if he killed your brother?
I didn't say that.
Okay. Well,
I didn't say feel empathy for all people in prison. I
oh,
would say there are people in prison who may be in prison for many, many years because they smoked a couple of joints, because they may have been
wow.
falsely convicted. So, so anyway, I'm just pointing out, as Rabbi Falik is pointing out, that there are boundary conditions on empathy, which again I think is what made this article, at least for me, worthy of looking more closely. Okay, would someone like to read about Jewish renewal?
I'll read. All
Go
right.
ahead. Thank you, Paul.
Excuse me. Renewal. Gauche, is it Gauche
Gosh,
pronounced Gosh?
gosh. It's not
Yeah.
Hebrew. It's just gosh.
I don't know how the new toxic empathy folks can read the Torah and avoid finding empathy. Indeed, the Torah mandates empathy as well as kindness and justice based on empathy. Over and over, the Torah teaches us not to harm or oppress the stranger, indeed, to love the stranger. Why? Because, says the Torah, you know what it's like to be a stranger in a strange land. As Rabbi
Shy,
Shai has prominently taught, our fundamental
our
percept
fo
is to
our
turn.
foundational.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Our foundational percept is to turn the experience of having been oppressed by slavery in ancient Egypt into empathy for the strangers residing in our midst. What about love your neighbor as yourself? By all means, love your neighbor, but the Torah cares a whole lot more than you love the stranger. Empathy and equal justice for the stranger are the Torah's greatest lessons of the Exodus from Egypt. These core Jewish values are being tested now. Here in the United States, decades of progress in expanding empathy are crumbling in the face of government cruelty towards immigrants. In Israel, we see an implosion of Jewish values as Palestinians continue to be ignored, deemed or treated as second-class citizens. How long can a Jewish nation endure if it is not based on empathy and justice for both its own citizens and Rabbi Gila?
No, no, and both on its own citizens and the strangers living among them.
Okay, great, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. So I would say this is more what I would have expected uh, to see. Um, and it is certainly true. In Israel, there are Palestinian citizens. They are citizens of Israel. They carry Israeli passports. They vote. They have 20% of representation in the Knesset. But uh, their treatment as equals is really not there, and it's continued to grow and expand. For one thing, Arabs cannot serve in the armed forces of Israel, except for Druze Muslims. And not serving in the armed forces is a tremendous disadvantage for Israelis if you haven't served. Like if you made Aliyah when you were too old to serve, or you had specific, even if you have health issues and so on, typically people will serve in other ways. Um, so it is not, it's not equal, and I would say, knowing so many Israelis, that in the wake of October 7th, there is not a lot of kindness and
Right.
sympathy
That's right.
in Israel for Palestinians.
That's right.
And so it may well be a Jewish value, as Rabbi Langner is saying, but it certainly is not uh, overly widespread in many Israelis. Paul, do you want
Yeah,
to?
I just want to say I'm having trouble with this because I don't see empathy as given to you with a spoon. You can't take a spoon, put it in your mouth, get the stuff off the food,
There
off the,
any
you
values
put it
that are
down in
given?
your body. You have to
No,
be, I
Paul.
think you go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying it's a value.
It is a
Values
value, yes.
values are not fed to you with a spoon.
No, they're
I,
not.
so
It's
I
a
don't know.
value.
I don't know what your issue is.
I don't know if you're born with it or not. I mean, how do you develop it is what I'm thinking about. You're not
So
given it with a spoon. You can't just take a spoonful of it and that's it. You have to
right,
use, you have to gain it somehow.
right. So I would say, I mean, it's sort of interesting to watch experiments. Psychologists do experiments, and sometimes you see this
Hello?
with
I've
kids.
been trying to
Uh,
send you a text
hang,
message
hang
asking
on,
if
I'm
you're
going to
okay.
mute Alan. You see it with very young children, where they get more cookies than their brother or sister,
Right,
and they may or may not share it.
right.
So I do think it is inborn, and I think, and actually it makes sense to me in a Darwinian sense, that we feel empathy for others around us.
That's right.
And I often think that we have an inborn sense of trust to people in our tribe, and the closer they get to me, the more empathetic I might feel. I feel more
Yes.
empathy for my brothers and parents and children than I feel for my neighbors and for the people who live in the next town and other countries and so on. So I
Right.
do think there's good old-fashioned Darwinian survival reasons for people to have empathy.
That's right.
And then, I think the religious issue is, should you have empathy for strangers? And I think one of the underlying things going on in religion is the idea that strangers are really in the same tribe as we are, because we're all created in God's image.
That's
So
right.
should you have empathy for your enemies? Should we have empathy for Iranians that are being killed? Do we have empathy? Several hundred chil children were killed at a girls' school by an errant missile.
Yes.
Uh, do we have empathy for them? Do we have empathy for think about the new leader of Iran in this
Yes. Right.
attack, that it killed his father, it killed his
Yes.
mother, it killed, um, I think, his wife and his child.
Wow.
So do we have any sense of empathy for that guy? I guess it depends what channel you watch on TV. Joanne.
No, I think it's really hard. I think you're born with it, that it's innate, but I also think that you learn as you go along how you really feel about the value, and maybe you need to work with it, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there's a story in the Talmud. There's a lot of stories in the Talmud about a wagon driver and a sage or a rabbi. And apparently there's a story, one that I remember at least, is a rabbi is being drawn, and the wagon driver is an extraordinarily ugly guy. And he makes some comment about how ugly this guy is.
Yeah.
And the wagon driver says, "I'm sorry, but you'll have to take it up with my maker." And the rabbi immediately realizes that what a terrible offense he has committed. Um, so I would say, in that sense, it's certainly is a Jewish value. Paul.
Yeah. I was once in the YMCA in the in the gym and then the shower room. And in the shower room was a man who was burned from head to toe and had his son with him.
Hmm.
And nobody said a word to him. Nobody even looked at him.
Hmm.
He was there standing all by himself with his son and just followed his son around. I went over to him and I said, "You're a very brave man. I really like you." And he just about started to cry because nobody else talked to him. Nobody else talked to him.
Hmm.
Uh, I felt a big deal of empathy in my body. I don't know if everybody does that. I have no idea what other people do.
Clearly, not everybody does that because you were
No,
the
they
only one.
don't. They don't. They
I mean,
don't.
there's also a teaching in Judaism that if someone is begging, you're supposed to give them something, even if it's a fig leaf.
That's right.
And, so many times, and I'm guilty of this myself, of you just, try and avoid making um, eye contact with people because it's uncomfortable.
It's
So,
very,
so,
yes.
so empathy isn't natural.
Yes. It's not
Yeah,
natural. You have
yeah.
to gain it somehow. You have to
And
gain it.
and also there's a question of, and it's a judgment call. Is this someone who really wants to be acknowledged?
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure I told this story. One time I had a very bad black eye, which arose from a circumstance that I didn't want to discuss. And I was in rabbinical school in Los Angeles, and I had so many of my fellow rabbinic students would say, I don't want to pry, but let me pry. I don't want to pry, but how did that happen? And I think my remark may have been somewhat snide, saying, "Thank you for not prying." Um, but our counseling teacher, I passed her in the hall, and she said something perfect, and I will never forget it.
What is it?
She said to me, "That must hurt."
Wow. That's
So
wonderful.
she was acknowledging it. She
Yes.
was giving me an opening if I wanted to talk about it,
Yes.
but she wasn't putting me in an uncomfortable
That's a
position.
wonderful,
But
So,
that's
wonderful
just
way to
it.
do that.
You want to be gentle with something like that, and
Yes.
you let the person, like you just said, they'll let you know if you
Yes.
can tell either body language or something they've said verbally, for you to reach out more to them because it could be very sensitive.
the most
Exactly.
empathetic person I know is my wife, Sonia,
Wow.
who
You're lucky.
who also, teaches me what she learned growing up in Casablanca, which is very much a high culture, both French culture and Spanish culture. And I also think this is European manners as distinguished from American manners. In in her world, no one would ever ask someone, "What do you do for a living?"
Right.
No one would ever ask. I mean, I think even in our culture, we wouldn't ask someone, "How much money do you make?" But we all the time we ask, "What do you do for a living?"
Right.
And depending on the person, that can be a very painful question.
It
The
can be.
person can be out of
Absolutely.
work. Just a simple
Absolutely.
question like, "Do you have kids?" For anyone who's lost a child, that is a very painful question. Or just
Sure.
children that are in trouble, maybe in prison or something. So Sonia is excruciatingly careful about that, and she has taught me. Um, you know, and what I will do if I want to make conversation is I will ask questions like, "What do you enjoy doing? What keeps you busy?"
Yeah.
Um, you know, um, what open-ended questions which completely leaves the other person in control of what they want to say and not feeling like, I lost a child. Do I say I have two children or three children? You know,
Exactly.
and, uh,
So important.
and you clearly, at a cocktail party conversation, you don't want to open saying, "Yeah, I had three children, but one died a year ago of a drug overdose." That's not cocktail party conversation. But it is a sense of empathy in that your interactions with the other person is focused on caring for the emotional comfort of the other person.
Exactly right. That's right.
Jerry. You're muted, Jerry.
When my son lived abroad and studied in Spain, I asked him what he noticed were the differences between the people of Spain and Americans. And he said, well, exactly what you said. We ask, what what do you do for work?
Right.
They would say, what do you dream of?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So, yeah,
yeah, that's
which is a much more interesting
Good too.
question.
That's good too. Yeah, absolutely.
I think
Yeah,
Rabbi
go ahead,
Mike,
Karen. Go ahead.
I think what you just said about your wife is an answer to Paul. Like, how do we come by the value of empathy?
Yes,
I
exactly.
think we learn it. I don't. I mean, people with certain personalities, hardwiring in the brain, may be born with a propensity to develop it on their own. But I think a lot is modeled by how parents deal with situations
Hmm.
and point out to children, or you meet people who show you another way of dealing with other people. And so we need to become aware as we grow in our lives to not be judgmental, because I think judgment gets in the way of having empathy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Actually, our tradition speaks very kindly of judgment. I'm looking up at my
Oh,
ordination certificate, and it says, as part of it, Yadin, Yadin, you will judge. That's one of the jobs of a rabbi. So we are supposed to judge the actions of others.
okay.
Um, but I absolutely agree with you, and it strikes me that what I'm describing that I learned from Sonia is a tool. Of course, I would agree I should care about the feelings of others, but it wouldn't even occur to me that asking someone, what do you do? Or how many children do you have? Uh, is can be a painful question. I just have to say, this is my own lack of empathy, lack of learning, is it wouldn't occur to me that that's an issue. Jerry.
oh, I
Oh, okay.
can lower it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I, I just have to say, and I keep beating a dead horse here. Uh, in the school district I used to work at, I once led a lecture about the people that attend the school, the parents that attend the school. And in the school were kids who otherwise had parents who were not very nice. They had lower education and they could yell at you and scream at you. And do you think the kids were empathetic towards anybody else hearing that from their parents? I would think not. They learned how to do that. They learned how to be irritating to other people, especially the kids around them. So I'm thinking that empathy is from within, but it also comes from people who train you to be less empathetic because of their behavior.
Yeah, and I would say sort of the counterexample for Sonia is a really interesting one. She was a school psychologist,
Yes,
and she would visit homes in South Central.
right.
And she was once in the home of a black family, and it was a little boy. I don't know if it was a younger sibling of the one she was working with or the one she was working with. And the child was just climbing all over the place up in the cabinets. And her remark was, he's just like a little monkey.
Right.
Right.
And
Right.
and the
Mm.
particularly since Sonia is African, the African community in that school thinks of Sonia as a sister. But she had no idea, just like I had no idea that, asking someone how many children they have could be a painful question.
Right.
Sonia just did not know that in this country, that's not something you say to a black person.
Right.
So some of it is intellectual learning, and some of it comes from, a deep emotion. I mean, Sonia, when I say she's the most empathetic, I'll give you two great examples. We'll pass by someone who is fishing, and Sonia will be close to tears seeing the fish in the bucket.
Oh, sure.
Another one, which was even better, is we were having a picnic somewhere, and we were being bothered by flies hovering around the food. Okay. So my job was to keep doing this. Sonia, also being smarter and more empathetic than I, took a little bit of food, put it on a plate or a napkin or something, and put it at the other end of the picnic table. And the flies quickly learned if they went to that food, they didn't have this big guy swatting them all of the time. And it worked. And I often, say all living things love Sonia. Anyway, including me, Stephen,
Well,
and then
that's very
Joanne.
Buddhist.
Okay.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Okay, Stephen, and then Joanne.
Couple of thoughts. The what do you enjoy or what makes you happy question could be problematic for somebody who is severely depressed and really doesn't enjoy or anything or ever feel happy and wouldn't necessarily want to have to tell you that. So I'm not sure that that's a perfect solution to the asking something that will not be awkward for anybody.
I think you're right. So yeah. So
and also there are people who don't like to be asked open-ended questions because they don't know how to respond or how long to make their response.
Yes.
Or to choose which one thing to use as the best example, and that a factual question where they know exactly what the answer is and it is easier for them.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And so I don't think it's simple. So again, you try and ask a question in a way that someone who really doesn't want to talk. So what keeps you busy? The answer might be this and that, and then how about the Dodgers? So it is again being. I think what you're describing is the importance of being tuned into the feelings of the other, and not everyone is a mirror of you. Joanne.
So I'm just thinking about what I do by profession as a healthcare consultant. Very often when people come to me, they're coming, a lot of what I get, they need some empathy, but I can feel it out as I'm start working with them. What does this person really need?
Right.
But but the boundary, yes, is very important. Sometimes I have to try to give a lot of support. I mean, I don't have to do anything, but I want to. Okay. I want to show support and empathy because I believe that's a big part of what makes people comfortable working with me. If that's, you know what I'm saying, if there's a circumstance there. So in other cases, people don't want it. And I can evaluate very quickly what the need is and, how much empathy I need to show them. So it varies, but, you have to be sensitive if you're going to work with people. You have to immediately figure out, well, for what the kind of work that I do, or I'm sure like what Paul and Cheryl do, you have to figure out what this person really needs to stay comfortable in the circumstance.
So I'm just observing that the renewal person began by saying, gosh, yes. And the Reconstructionist rabbi is saying, heck yeah. So would someone else like to read the heck yeah discussion?
I don't mind reading again.
Go ahead, Karen. Karen, go ahead.
Empathy comes straight from scripture. Our most basic and golden rule, love your neighbor as yourself, in Leviticus 19:18. Sorry. We are commanded to see those around us as indistinguishable from ourselves, commanded to bear the yoke with our neighbor in Avot 6:6, even when the yoke is heavy. And how can we not, when our neighbors of every nation, creed, and color equally carry the divine image, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. They are not heavy, they're our siblings. Hillel makes it clearer still in his articulation of that universal golden truth. What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah. Talmud Bavli Shabbat 31a. I don't know what that is.
Okay, so Talmud, you've heard the word Talmud.
Yes.
Bavli is the Babylonian Talmud, which is the most cited and most discussed Talmud. Shabbat is the tractate. The Talmud consists of lots of different tractates, one of which is called Shabbat, and it's page 31 on the A side of the page. The way the pages are numbered, one side of the page is 31A, the other side of the page is 31B. And
Okay.
also going back to what you read before,
Yes.
Avot is another tractate of Mishnah, and it's sometimes called the Pirkei Avot, the sayings of the fathers.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
right here, mic drop.
Mic drop. Empathy, our full loving identification with others, is the whole Torah. It's painful even to have to spell this out, but such are the times in which we live. Against the ominous winds of political discourse and social media, Judaism insists that we be distinctly countercultural and hold aloft such big, holy, ancient ideals as empathy. Tacking into today's mean-spirited breeze, let's proudly unfurl our tall, empathic sails and make slow, steady headway toward the sacred shores of love and interconnection.
Well said. One of the things that strikes me, I remember thinking about this living in Israel, is Judaism teaches ethics from a position of powerlessness. Certainly, the Talmud is developed and Jewish law is developed during a time when the rabbis have no power. And so we can preach pure ethics like this. I remember, vividly seeing police harass Arabs in the streets of Jerusalem, young men. And I remember thinking, it's one of the problems of being in charge. It's one thing if I'm powerless, I can preach empathy and we're all created in God's image. But now what do I do if it's my job to prevent people from blowing up buses? Or, I remember a terrible thing just before I was living in Israel on the day before Purim when kids are shopping. I mean, think of it like the day of Halloween. Kids are shopping for all kinds of things, and there was this bomb set off in a shopping center in Tel Aviv. When you're in charge, you can respect the Jewish value of empathy, but it's also your job to keep people safe. And it's not easy. I am very glad that no one calls upon me to make those decisions. Joanne, I don't know if you had your hand up again or
No, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to
no,
lower it.
that's okay. Okay, I'll read reform since I am one. The Hebrew word empathia is a loan word adopted from English. There is no ancient Hebrew word that is direct equivalent for the English word empathy. One might think that this indicates that empathy is not a Jewish value, but that is not the case. Found in the Talmudic tractate Pirkei Avot, the same thing we identified, Avot, 6:6, same reference, is a list of 48 Jewish virtues, also called midot. Practicing these midot makes one a true learner and practitioner of Torah and an ethical person. At the top of the list, right after study of Torah, is the phrase Shemiat ha'ozen, which literally means listening, a listening ear. Shemiat comes from the word for listen or hear, Shema. We know that word. The same root, there it is. Same root as the word Shema. Ozen means ear. As a character trait, Shemiat ha'ozen, attentive listening, is more than just the physical act of hearing. Usar, the Jewish spiritual and ethical practice intended to help one live a holy life, embraces Shemiat ha'ozen. To practice Shemiat ha'ozen is to be focused and caring, to be a non-judgmental presence, seeking deep understanding of the other. Shemiat ha'ozen requires curiosity, humility, and an ability to put oneself in the place of the other, with the aim of truly understanding them and coming to a new understanding of oneself. This is the beginning of empathy. And this is Laura Novak Weiner, who is now, I think as of last year, the head of the rabbinic program at HUC in Los Angeles.
That's a beautiful statement. Beautiful statement.
Yeah, yep, she is.
Why is it state press now?
That's where she lives. I'm not sure what she's doing these days. If she's
She commutes
commuting back and forth,
press.
I really don't know. Yeah, no, there's definitely not an HUC office in Fresno. And she's has only been, well, anyway, I don't know where she lives. Okay. Um, Somebody want to read the conservative? Let's
I'll
see, is
read
it?
it. Nobody
Thank you.
wants.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. There is no doubt in my mind that empathy is a Jewish value. So many of our sources teach the importance of understanding and sharing the feelings of another. Genesis tells us that all humanity was created in Hashem's image. The Torah repeatedly 36 times reminds the Israelites that their experience as slaves in Egypt is foundational for their laws. And love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19:18, is also a foundational teaching. In modern times, I turn to Rachel Goldberg Pollen, the mother of slain hostage Hirsch Goldberg Pollen.
ZL is Zichrono. Let's see, male. Yeah, Zichrono Lebracha. May his memory be a blessing.
Oh, oh, yeah, okay. Rachel became known for her tireless activism to raise awareness of the plight of the hostages. But I hope her legacy to her fellow Jews and the world will also be her tender and capacious heart. It's a heart that holds her aching pain while also holding the pain of the other side. One of the most moving examples of this is the poem One Tiny Seed, which Rachel wrote for a woman in Gaza and delivered before the UN in December 2023.
Right.
Cultivating empathy is not intuitive or easy. Rachel is my role model. Her composure, her wisdom, her moral compass are unbelievable. Since October 7th, I have had to work very hard to be empathetic to people I perceive as a threat or danger.
Yes.
Besides making Rachel my teacher, I also remind myself regularly that empathy is not an endorsement. It is being willing to listen and see.
Perfect. That is so nice.
Very good.
So nice.
Yeah, that is really sweet.
She also wrote a poem
Beautiful.
about Hirsch after they learned from photos that one of his arms had been blown off by Hamas, and she described this, this wanting her back, wanting him to come home in poetry, you know, sort of basically saying, "What's an arm? You don't need an arm. That's not your life." It was just and written by the mother during this terrible period.
Yeah,
Was
there's
there any
also,
outcome to that, or any outcome about to that
sorry,
from this child who had an arm blown off?
He was well. He's talking about her. She was murdered as
he's
part of
dead.
six. Is that what your question was?
Yeah, I mean, when the child was it a child or a parent that
He
had the
was
arm?
20, 21, 22 years old.
Okay, what
Yeah,
was there any outcome?
he was a hostage, uh, uh you know, kidnapped in Gaza
Oh my gosh.
and died in captivity.
Oh my gosh.
So for someone to have empathy for Palestinians, being in that role is quite a statement.
Oh my.
Yep, yep.
That's
You know,
very hard.
people talk about empathy exhaustion.
Yeah.
And I think yeah, look, Alan, you wore a bit of tape, literally counting the days of how long the hostages were in captivity, and and I think for many people, it's the oh God, there they are. For many
So
people, it was how
Oh,
long do we have to keep thinking about this? You just get exhausted. I mean, it's anyway, empathy
it's
is not
kind of
not so easy.
interesting, if I can add. Yeah,
That
so I tore off this masking tape from year day 100 to 737. Other people wore it all the way until the dead hostages were returned. But in
hmm
any event, I'm just realizing how much I don't think about it anymore. While I was going through it,
hmm
it was very present, and
hmm
and and it was present even when I stopped wearing the tape. But in the year, just in the short number of weeks since all the hostages have been home,
Mhm.
safe, and even the deceased ones, I'm thinking about my own mindset. Is I don't think about it. Um,
We have new things to think about, Alan.
Yeah,
well,
it's impossible to sustain so many emotions all the time.
Rabbi
Um,
Martyr once wrote or presented a presentation on why it's important to forget. And it had to do with ordinary things, not
mhm,
just who died and who was
mhm.
killed and the tragedies, and even good news. It's just that our body, our minds are built in a way that we should expect to forget certain things.
Yes.
I gave a sermon, maybe I'll do this again sometime, a high holiday sermon on golf. And the notable part of it was just before giving the sermon, this was on Yom Kippur, I'm pretty sure. I had a golf club and a ball, and I putted it across the bema. And I said, now you can all tell all your friends that you caught the rabbi playing golf on Yom Kippur. Um, but one of the things I mentioned that the secret of happiness in golf and in life is selective memory. Um, I play golf with guys who remember every lousy shot they took.
Mhm.
And when they get a good shot, their attitude is, well, I'll probably have, 10 more lousy ones before the day is over. And I think that's just a general, optimist, pessimist thing. But it is true. There's so much grief in the world. And I think this is a case where we are biologically tuned to be empathetic for things right in front of us, things that we see. And the problem is with this device, we can see horrible things all over the world all the time. And how do we deal with that psychologically or even biologically? How do you deal with that when you lived in a little village and you had a few hundred people, and those were the people in your village, and you probably wouldn't come across a lot of other people. You would feel terrible empathy. You would feel empathetic towards someone who was hurt or killed or whatever. But I do think, that's um, a real issue. There's a lot of discussion now about the 100, I don't know, 150 children killed by an errant U.S. missile. Well, the Iranians murdered, the number I hear is something like 30,000 people during these uprisings, but there wasn't a lot of video of it. We don't see a lot of it. So we see the caskets of the seven soldiers, Zichronam Livracha, being carried, and we get interviews of their families, and it is a world, I would say, that attacks our senses in ways both good and bad. Yeah, Alan.
So I don't remember the exact definition of empathy, but when you mentioned that because of the internet, we can find bad things all over the world, you also can find good things.
Yes.
And so when we can go back to the definition, and does empathy also apply to having sharing some good news that
Well, I think the definition, I'm just going back now, it's the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. So,
so good.
so
So
yeah.
in many temples, I'm sure, but at Central Synagogue on Friday night, when they do the Mishaberach and listen to people talking about various things, issues related to
Hmm.
healing, they follow it with the Shechechianu.
Hmm.
And then they invite information about birthdays, weddings, adoptions, dogs,
Hmm.
anything you want. But the combination of the two are, in my experience, are healthy because they are reminding us there's some of both.
And I have seen that a lot in Christian services. It is
Yeah.
certainly not a traditional part of Jewish services.
No, no,
Uh,
I've
Even a
seen it.
Misha Berach is not. A Misha Berach is said for people who are called for the Torah in traditional Judaism.
Sure. When it's done in most of the temples, so I'm only citing
Yeah.
Central as an example, even when we do it on Friday night without the Torah open, we do the Mishabah prayers, but we don't do what the balancing part. It makes me feel like there's a way you just defined it. Good things are also a
Mm-hmm.
part of empathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
But I,
think
but I,
that,
go ahead, Joanne.
sorry. No, I'm just thinking like with my medical condition, I run a Zoom support group, right? And it's a time where we really, it's not only listening, you can listen, but do you really hear what somebody is saying? You know, but the very sweet part of it is that everybody can show each other empathy, which
Mm-hmm.
is very comforting for us because
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately what I have is very complex and very rare.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times people just don't know what I'm talking about, and I try to advocate in different ways to help people.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so much I can do, but um, it's just nice to have a group of people who can support one another and show the empathy. Everybody is in a different place. Like I said earlier, some people need more empathy than others. Some don't want it at all. But in this particular group, yeah, empathy is definitely there. And it's a wonderful thing to have that.
I often quote as the truest statement I've ever heard a statement by Joseph Telushkin's mother, not by Joseph Telushkin, Helen of blessed memory, who said, "The only people I know without serious problems are people I don't know very well."
Oh, I gave
And
him credit for himself.
no,
I've
it was his mother.
heard it before.
Well,
Um,
sometimes we say to each other, put yourself in my shoes and see how you feel now that I've described to you what I have. Okay. You tell me what it feels like. And
That's
then,
also a quote almost literally from the Pirkei Avot, isn't it, Rabbi? This putting yourself in the mindset of other
yeah.
people. I think it's
I
from
do,
Pirkei Avot
yeah,
also. Yeah.
there's a lot in the
Okay.
Pirkei Avot. I don't
Yeah.
remember that's.
Takea Vote and Musar are, for me anyway, I think they're really great. I mean, they really take it down. They water down what you read in the weekly Torah portion, and you see it from a different perspective. But
And the important thing is to live it. I have to tell you,
right,
I took a class with Sonia about Musar, and Sonia didn't get much out of it because it was basically preaching to the choir. She was already there. She didn't know it in
right.
Jewish terms. But I can tell you the person who taught it, and I won't mention who that was, didn't always practice it. And
Well, yeah, yeah.
so it's
Unfortunately, that happens. You have
yep.
to really want to work with it.
Hmm. Okay, well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Uh,
Beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
and we'll pick up with the rest of this article next time, and we'll see you when I see you.
Is Monday, we have a class Monday or
We do
no?
have a class on Monday. We are still plowing our way
Okay,
at a rate of about a chapter and a half per night
okay.
through Ecclesiastes.
How many chapters are there in Ecclesiastes?
12.
Okay.
All
Good,
right.
good. Thank
All right,
you.
everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Toda.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Guys. This
Bye.
was